Good morning, good afternoon to everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today. Sorry about the delay. I had a little button pushing problem. Today's webinar is very much directed at you, those involved in regulatory and permitting processes for marine renewable energy. This call was by invitation only, so that's everyone on the line. We do have some of our Annex IV, our international participants, listening in as well. What we want to talk about today is environmental effects of marine renewable energy, MRE, particularly as they apply to permitting. My name is Andrea Copping, and I am a senior scientist here at Pacific Northwest National Laboratory. And along with my group, we are charged with pulling together, evaluating, and disseminating information on marine renewable energy effects, particularly in support of permitting for this new low-carbon industry. What I want to do today is talk a little bit about the drivers of marine renewable energy, or MRE. I want to talk about the need to collect environmental effects information, and then spend the bulk of time really running through what it is we believe we know about environmental effects of MRE. And the three main sources of information I'm using are listed here. The 2016 State of the Science report that is sponsored by Annex IV. We have a series of dashboards that were created by Sharon Kramer and myself for a recent workshop held by the Oregon Wave Energy Trust, and also information from a regulatory workshop sponsored by the Department of Energy that was held in Washington, D.C. about a year and a half ago. And there you have the citations. You will get an opportunity to download these slides and look at them later, so you don't need to be looking at that furiously trying to identify it. Okay, so first of all, the drivers of marine renewable energy development. I think they're obvious to all of us. We need low carbon reliable energy sources to mitigate climate change. There are renewable energy standards developed in many nations, many regions, states, for example, in this country. And there is growing interest in energy independence and energy security. And the beauty of marine renewable energy is it's very scalable, from the very small to the quite large. However, there continue to be concerns from stakeholders about potential impacts, and I think it's fair to say that the regulatory processes are not necessarily well established. They're still very new. Now, why is this occurring? It's because these are largely new, unknown technologies, and they have unknown potential impacts. This represents the use of a new ocean space, and there's already many users in that space. And unfortunately, we don't have an awful lot of basic oceanographic information about these high energy areas. The places we want to go and harvest wave energy, tidal energy, are places that, for instance, as an oceanographer, I would keep my equipment out of because they're very dangerous and easy to lose things, so we know less than we might. And finally, the concerns for the particular animal species around MRE devices happen to be many of the same animal populations that are already under stress, be it from human activities, climate change, etc. So it is our belief that improved information can help to simplify and shorten the time to permit deployment of devices, which will then allow us to learn more about potential impacts. But it needs to be said that no matter how much we learn on a broad basis about, from research programs, from monitoring data, about particular processes, animals interacting with devices, effects on habitats, etc., site-specific information for any development will always be needed. It's just a matter of how much site-specific information. All right, so I want to move into the sources of information and what it is we actually know, and I mentioned the State of the Science report. This is sponsored by the Ocean Energy Systems of the IEA and also by the U.S. Department of Energy. And some of the very clear background to developing the State of the Science report is that this industry, the wave, tidal, and other marine renewable energy industries, are in very early stages of development and deployment, and we're just moving towards commercialization. The very first commercial tidal array went in the water and started operating within the last few months, and that's in the north of Scotland, and it's only 4 turbines. We also still have a need to streamline permitting and siting processes. And what we believe is that by putting this information together, for example, in the State of the Science report, we can inform regulators and researchers about potential risks from tidal and wave developments. We can also provide the developers of these, this equipment and these projects to direct engineering, siting, operational strategies, and monitoring options that will minimize encounters with marine animals and habitats, and really let us understand what needs to be done, what is effective, what monitoring data are needed, and what may be less useful. I mentioned Annex IV. Now, under the International Energy Agency, there are a whole number of committees or groups of nations with similar interests who group together. For wave and tidal development, this is the Ocean Energy Systems. And I believe there's 25 or 26 nations involved at this point, plus the European Commission. Under the Ocean Energy Systems, they have a series of tasks, originally called annexes. And Annex IV deals with environmental effects of marine renewable energy. The countries under OES then opt to participate in a task. At the moment, we have 13 countries participating in Annex IV. It is led by the U.S. The U.S. Department of Energy is the operating agent, and we, Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, implement this program for them. You see the countries who were involved with us, the U.S. and the 12 partner nations, and you can read there what the purpose of Annex IV is. But in a nutshell, we are charged with understanding what is going on with environmental effects, pulling together relevant information, and being sure that information is broadly available to all who need it. The purpose being to try to move this industry forward, to try to bring this new renewable energy online for the various nations. Before I get into the meat of this, one more thing I want to flag for you. If you are not already familiar with tethys, I would like to note that. Tethys is an online knowledge management system that was developed and is maintained at PNNL, at my lab. That is the front page of it you see there. And the function is to really bring this information together and make it very readily available. The knowledge base, which is sort of the heart of tethys, has in the order of 3,500 entries. Those are research papers, reports, other media. I do want to note that tethys also serves environmental effects information for wind, both land-based and offshore. But within those 3,500 entries, about 1,700 are specific to marine renewable energy. There are others that cover numerous renewable energy sources, and then the balance covers wind. We run a series of webinars, not counting this one, but on a quarterly basis, expert forums, workshops, etc. And you can, I've got the green arrow there just showing you can get straight into Annex IV from the front page. You can get into the knowledge base. There's the URL up top there. And I would encourage you, if you aren't familiar with tethys, please get on there and take a look. We think it's pretty useful. Okay, back to the State of the Science report. Now I'm going to organize the sort of categories of what we know about marine renewable energy effects around this particular report. Now this is a report that was put out, it's coming up on a year ago now. It's quite lengthy, it's 10 chapters, about 250 pages. There were 10 authors from 6 nations who contributed to this. And we'll just kind of walk through this, and then I'll bring in some other information. Okay, one of the early chapters really tried to pull together what we know about risk from environmental effects. And what we find worldwide is that much of the perception and the idea of risk of some of the encounters between marine animals, habitats, and so on with devices is really driven by scientific uncertainty. At one level, this is good news because it means with more data collection, we can likely decrease that uncertainty and get a better handle on what these risks really are. When we look worldwide, the most important and potentially the highest risks, at least those that are being flagged most frequently for concerns for permitting, are collision of animals with tidal turbine blades, the moving blade hurting the animals directly, underwater noise from both wave and tidal devices potentially disrupting animals, and electromagnetic fields from both power cables and energized devices continues to come up as an issue here in the U.S. and abroad. If we were to look very broadly at what we know so far without all that many devices in the water, it appears that single devices are really not going to contribute very much risk. We really think that the single devices are going to be quite, as the industry likes to say, benign. What we aren't so sure about is as we get to larger levels of deployment. We have used a screening, a way of looking at this using stressors and receptors. A stressor being any part of a MRE device or system that might cause harm to animals' habitats or ecosystem processes, and a receptor being those animals' habitats or ecosystem processes. And this table that I've just put up here is sort of one of many in this chapter, but it's the one that wraps it all up. And what we have tried to do is, along the rows are the stressors. A static device is just a device sitting in the water on the bottom or in the water column or on the surface. A dynamic device is when it's actually, for instance, spinning as a tidal turbine, bobbing, and a generator moving on a wave energy device, etc. Acoustic being the noise. Energy removal being taking energy out of the water for electricity and or changing flow within the physical system. EMF, chemical leaching. And we've used this green, ochre, orange as sort of our low, medium, high risk. The columns are for single device, small, commercial-size commercial device, which might just mean a few, turbines or WECs. And then the large-scale commercial, many more. Now, this is obviously a very general kind of wrap-up, but what you immediately see is that we think at the single device and moving towards the larger one, we go from really pretty low risk across the board to slightly higher risk. The exception is this collision risk around tidal turbines because we know so little. We have concerns that we really haven't totally sort of wrestled this risk to the ground. And as we move to larger commercial arrays, there is simply no more. We really aren't there because we have no real straight information. Okay, moving on. The largest chapter in the State of the Science represents this collision risk of animals with tidal turbines. The animals we consider most at risk are marine mammals, fish, and diving seabirds. It's important to be aware there's never been an observation of a marine mammal or a seabird being hit by a device. We have video of fish interacting very closely with devices, but no apparent harm. But the problem is we don't have huge numbers of observations, and the instruments, the technologies to really look at what's going on between an animal and a device up close aren't very good. They're not as developed as they could be, and this is partly because of these very high energy areas are hard to work in and take observations. In many cases, the water is quite murky. Do you use lights to try to improve things, etc.? So it's very difficult. In lieu of being able to really observe closely many animals and turbines, we have worldwide tended to try to think about the number of animals that might be there in close proximity and potentially at risk, and then try to understand their abilities, their sensory and evasion potential as they get close to a device. And as you can imagine, we think marine mammals, while they're moving quickly, have better sensory and evasion capabilities than perhaps some of these others. It's also important to note that we are looking at individuals, the potential for individuals colliding with turbines. We still have to be able to do this sort of translation up to what this means at a population effect. And for all of you who work in that field, you'll know this is still a very imprecise science. Okay, now I mentioned the dashboards we've put together, that Sharon Kramer of H.D. Harvey and I put together for this workshop we had last fall. And the purpose here was really to have a very simple, visually compelling way to think about this level of risk and how it might change over time. And what we did was pick this old-fashioned looking odometer So we again get this sense of risk with the dial from green to very low through yellow up to red, and put that arrow in to estimate where we think this level of risk or concern is at the moment. We further thought about what would it take to better understand that risk, perhaps lower the risk down towards the green, but at least better understand it. And we've picked 4 types of actions. The first is, and these are represented by that bar graph there. Don't worry about that percentage there. That's just trying to show a relative kind of importance. On the royal blue on the left, we believe there's existing information that needs to be better shared, and that's definitely important in this case. We believe we need better modeling of these kinds of interactions of animals and devices, and we definitely need monitoring data to verify those models. There's also still a need for additional research. I mentioned we don't have the instruments that we really need. There's so many things we don't understand about the animal behavior around devices. So this one is really why this points up towards a pretty high risk. But we do think there's many of these paths that can help to improve our understanding of this risk. Okay, moving on to underwater noise. I think those of you that deal with the ocean at all know very well that marine animals use sound underwater as terrestrial animals use sight and light on land. And so it's tremendously important that we understand what kind of disruptive capabilities there are to underwater sound. The concern is that sound from MRE devices, wave devices, tidal devices, could add to other anthropogenic sounds and maybe disturb animals and the many things that they use sound for: navigation, communication, other social interactions. We have been measuring sound coming out of individual turbines and WECs, and we have a pretty good handle on those. And we can, with quite sophisticated acoustic modeling capabilities in the ocean, understand what the sound from arrays might look like. We worry about this because there is lots of data from other industries that make a lot of noise in the ocean, that there can be actual physical harm to animals as well as behavioral changes. Now, the sounds coming out of these devices compared to shipping, much less pile driving, are not loud at all. But could they, in fact, interrupt behavior? That's the big question, I think, still on the table. And we just don't have very good information there. We need better data of how these animals might react to these sounds. And back to the same kind of dashboard look you saw for the other one for collision, what you see here is we still have concern about the level of risk of these acoustic outputs from both tidal and wave devices, but it's obviously a lower risk than collision. And we think much of this risk really is because we just plain don't know. What you see is that from the bar charts is sharing additional information absolutely has to happen, especially as new information is coming in all the time. We can still improve on models, both of the acoustic output, but very much of animal behavior. We're very much in need of monitoring data to verify those models and find out what's really happening out there. And because of the behavioral component and what we don't know about these animals behaving both in the high energy environments and around these turbines or WECs, there is still a need for considerable research. Okay, next, looking at changes in physical systems. Now, if we're to put a tidal device down on the seabed or a WEC up on the surface or at mid-water column, there is some change in going to be some change in circulation of water around it. Tidal devices, we think of changes in the way the water circulates, for instance, in a tidal basin. With WECs, it's more likely that we're taking some of the energy out of the waves. This was early on of great concern to surfers. I think we've been able to show that the changes where most surfing takes place are pretty unlikely to be measurable. Now, we have not been able to do any measurements in this space, but they're through hydrodynamic modeling, which is really quite a sophisticated art, numerical modeling. We can get a very good idea of how water bodies circulate, how waves are produced, interact, how much energy there is, etc. And by simulating tidal turbines or wave energy devices in these models, we can get a very good sense that the kinds of changes that would occur from single devices or even a couple of devices are very, very small and absolutely impossible to measure in all the variability in the physical oceanography. What we don't know is if we get up to very, very large numbers of devices, will this still hold true? And again, we can do this through numerical models, and we have. And what we find before you get to changes in the several percentage range of circulation, amount of power that is still in the waves, and so on, what you are talking about is hundreds to thousands of devices in most cases. Again, you have to site them in the right place, but in the right place, that's the kind of level we're thinking about. And I strongly suspect that for other reasons, that many devices will never be deployed in an area, so for just because of other concerns. So this may be one that takes care of itself, but it is not one we consider to be of great concern at this point. And the dashboard very much reflects this, that we see this as a green, a low concern, and what we think really has to happen is sharing of existing information. We need to go on with some of the modeling, particularly as we try to get to larger arrays and many more devices. Electromagnetic fields. The concern here, of course, is that adding EMFs from power cables and energized parts of devices could disrupt naturally occurring magnetic fields in the ocean and really add to what else is going on out there, because we do have many other sources of EMFs in the ocean. However, it's important to note, if we're worried about animals, that there are only certain animals that have electro or magnetic sensors on their bodies, and they need to be able to sense these fields in order to be disturbed by them. Certain elasmobranchs, sharks and skates, certain invertebrates, we know some crabs, potentially some lobsters, etc., are aware and can detect these fields. What we don't know is how disturbed they will be by them. We also know that the export power cables, the big thick electrical cable that will take power from these devices at sea to land, can be buried, they can be covered, they can be essentially isolated from these animals if need be. We have looked considerably at EMF and animals in the lab. There's also a number of field studies, including a number that BOEM, the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, has sponsored recently. And all of these studies together, looking at the levels of EMFs likely to be put out by these devices and cables, tend towards thinking that there is likely to be little effect on any species, any population. There's still more to be learned, but we're getting, I think, closer on this one. The dashboard reflects a little higher level of risk than, for instance, we saw in physical systems, and that is because there still seem to be some unknowns. There is a need for sharing of existing information, good modeling of these kinds of processes, and more monitoring data just to verify those models. We don't believe there's a big need for new research. There's still research to be done about certain animals and dosages of EMF, but we don't see this as a major area where research needs to continue. We do need to have good measurement tools, which we don't always have just yet. Okay, moving on to changes in habitats. Now, as soon as you put a device out there, let's say you put a foundation of a tidal turbine down on the bottom, or you put embedment anchors from mooring lines of a wave energy device into the bottom, you are going to change some sediment and benthic habitats. The organisms that are living directly there. However, assuming that you site devices properly, for example, if you were to put wave devices off the west coast of the U.S., it was likely to be on the shelf or just onto the continental slope. There is a great deal, and you avoid rare reefs and so on, there is a great expanse of soft sediment out there, and the amount of sediment likely to be, and therefore benthic organisms likely to be affected, is very, very small. We know this from other industries. Similarly, if you put devices out in the ocean, there are certain animals that will come and hang around them. They will act as artificial reefs for certain organisms. What we know from other industries and from some of the work done in this field, there really is no evidence that this is going to cause significant harm, and it really does not differ from other industries. So we have a lot we can just simply sort of import in terms of learning from everything from oil and gas to other nearshore development. So for this reason, we see on the dashboard this being a very low green risk, and we see the major need to move this forward really is about increased sharing of existing information. Okay, those are the major chapters in the State of the Science report that really deal directly with certain stressors. Now, this set of dashboards here is on potential entanglement of large organisms, think whales, and mooring lines, did not receive separate treatment in the State of the Science, though we have referred to it in the collision risk chapter. There is still a lot of unknowns if you imagine a whole series of floating devices with mooring lines down to the bottom. There is concern that this could cause a confusion and possibly an entanglement of large whales. This is probably a pretty unlikely event for a number of reasons, including the fact these are not very slack line, which could create a loop and therefore ensnare a whale or other marine mammal, much as lost fishing gear might. But we really haven't had the opportunities to test this out. So for this reason, we still see this as a risk, although a pretty low ecological risk. Off the west coast, particularly in Oregon, there has been a lot of concern from the fishing community that the presence of these devices will entangle fishing gear. It's a little hard to sort this issue out from the sort of political issue of the fishing community really not wanting anybody to put anything out there. So for this reason, we consider this a higher risk, but I think it's important to note it's really not an ecological risk. The one concern that has been floated is if you have mooring lines some distance apart, could they in fact snare a large net, stretch it out, and then act as a ghost or a derelict fishing net? We are looking at this a little further. It does seem like not a very high risk, but that continues to keep this sort of on the agenda, as it were. We think the way forward for both the ecological and the entanglement fishing gear issue really is better sharing of existing information. Okay, just to finish up, a couple more chapters in the State of the Science report that are not stressor related, but I think have really good information for thinking about permitting marine renewable energy devices. Our Irish colleague Anne-Marie O'Hagan wrote a chapter on marine spatial planning and how its intersection with the marine renewable energy industry could be helpful. I think most of you probably know that marine spatial planning is planning and managing uses and users of the ocean so that everybody can work towards a sustainable and minimized environmental footprint. Anne-Marie went about this by polling the countries involved in Annex IV and really understanding how they use MSP in the marine renewables industry. And what we found was that several of the nations have formal MSP processes in place that include MRE, mostly in Europe. There are many of these MSP principles embedded in coastal management plans, while other countries really are not moving in this direction. And this chapter, which is really quite interesting read, really it finishes with the potential for this being a useful and transparent planning process to help us understand what environmental effects could be and how the MRE industry can exist with other users. We also had other European colleagues, Teresa Simas out of Portugal and Juan Bald out of Spain, interested in looking at projects that have been permitted and what we might learn from them. And they picked 4 projects: a wave project that had been deployed in Portugal, the TideGen ORPC turbine that was deployed in coastal Maine, the CGen tidal technology in Northern Ireland. That's what that picture on the left is. Many of us know this iconic red tower. This was the first of the big tidal turbines ever deployed, and it's just being decommissioned, pulled out now, but it's been in the water about 8 years, I guess. And finally, BMEP, which is actually a wave test site in northern Spain, but it has been fully permitted for a number of devices. It's, again, an interesting read of a chapter, But what, not a huge surprise to us here, but very strong evidence that strong stakeholder outreach throughout the process makes a big difference to moving forward smoothly. And again, maybe less surprise to us here, but not quite as ingrained in some other countries' regulations, that really having robust monitoring plans, adaptive management strategies, and sound environmental documentation, EIAs, EISs, et cetera, make a big difference. They also found that there are not among any of the OES countries are there dedicated policies that would really speak to wave and tidal devices, which for many of you on this call, I think is one of the challenges, that you really are having to use regulatory instruments that maybe aren't a great fit for this industry. Okay, and the final wrap-up of the State of the Science report is a chapter where we tried to say how do we move forward. We're in a fairly data-poor environment, but we want to keep moving forward. And based on the fact that much of this uncertainty and this perceived risk is based on scientific uncertainty, we believe that there is a path forward. The two little pie charts there are trying to represent this. If we look at the left-hand one, where we're in the present day, what we have is that large ochre area with a lot of uncertainty, and this is where regulators like you are asking for monitoring data. We need to know more about these interactions. The developers are more than happy to do that, but they are, this is a pretty thin margin industry at this point, and they're having a very hard time being able to cover all the bases. We at the same time have that very tiny red slice, which are those areas where we know there is likely to be some kind of harm and where mitigation is needed. We have an equally small little green slice, which are these low-risk areas where we believe there is not need to do a great deal more investigation. I'll give you an example. You might have noted in that, that little table of the risks, I had chemical leaching in there. We looked at this early on. Wave and tidal devices will be painted with anti-fouling paints and anti-corrosive paints. But by using those that are already registered with the EPA and other regulatory bodies worldwide, we looked at what the toxicity risk in various sizes of water bodies might be. And we have so much information on this from other industries, from shipping, from piles, nearshore development, and we found this was a completely negligible risk and well-informed from other industries. We want to call that a retired risk. It's not a risk that needs to be examined on an ongoing basis. And what we would like to do, I think, as a marine renewable energy research community is, represented by the big arrow down the bottom, collect more information and hopefully move to a future where the pie chart has a much bigger green slice where we have retired or put aside these risks. And as I like to say, they're retiring, they're not dying. They can always be brought back if need be. We believe there will always be some risks that will require mitigation. Maybe it's mitigation at the engineering stage where we really do it up front and improve or minimize the environmental footprint. And then that smaller ochre slice, it will be the continuing uncertainty where there continue to be risks we need to investigate. And this, we believe, will really allow better focus, better use of funds and people's time and everything else to really get at where there are things we don't know yet. So that is, I think that's my last real slide. That is a quick gallop through what we believe we know at this point. And what I would like to do now is really get feedback from you. We've sort of got two overall questions for you, the regulatory community. Because as we move forward as a research community, as an MRE community, it's important for us to understand what you think is important and challenging in permitting, so that the focus of everything from research studies to monitoring, data collection, to discussions among the regulatory community and developers and researchers are well informed. So the questions I put to you is, what are the real challenges you have as federal or state regulatory personnel? What are the real challenges you have in permitting this industry? And what particular environmental impacts information do you really need? Where are the places where you feel that the processes for collecting these data, for analyzing, displaying the data could be more effective or efficient? So I know this is a lot to spring on you all at once, but I would like to ask the AT&T operator if she'd open the lines, and if you have either questions about what I've presented, and or would be willing to share some of your thoughts, that would be wonderful. If you just identify yourself and go ahead, and we'll see how this works. Thank you.
Hi, this is Luis Andrea. Hi, as always, wonderful work that you guys do, but and you know what I'm going to ask you, but how do we get NIMS to read your information and to share amongst the different regions? You know, that's the biggest challenge by far. Is anybody from NIMS attending this webinar?
So the question comes from Luis Vega in Hawaii. Would any of the NOAA fisheries people on the line, if you don't want to address this, I understand, but the issue being, and no surprise to anyone in the federal agencies, that there is not complete consistency in application, levels of detail, processes, discussion, et cetera, at every point, at every portion of the country. Anybody like to address that? Okay, we've got, I see Sean McDermott, you've got your hand up too.
So I work for National Marine Fisheries Service on the East Coast. And I think, if I heard the question right, it was about consistency in application.
Yes.
If I'm addressing the question, if I'm hearing the question correctly, then the applications that we get from different groups, different applicants, vary greatly, or at least they did when we first started seeing proposals. We're down to one active applicant. And to the point that was made in the discussion, the outreach that this one applicant has done has made a huge difference. So I'm glad that that point was raised. I'm not sure if I answered the question that was asked, though.
That's really helpful, Sean. So what I think I hear there is that the applications and the level of detail and the involvement, including with stakeholders, by the developer can make a huge difference to how well that permitting process will go?
Absolutely.
Great, okay. I think the question was also directed at, it's possible that different NOAA staff in different regions may look at the severity of similar impacts differently. That's kind of an awkward way to say it.
No, I think that's an accurate way of saying it. And I really don't want to put words in other people's mouths, but it comes down to, from my experience and the people that I've worked with, it comes down to risk and how we individually, as biologists, view risk. And without getting into detail, there was a small project that an applicant wanted to put a turbine in. It was a very small turbine, just off his dock, and I saw it as very low risk, and my counterpart in a different resource agency thought it was going to be a big impact on fish through the direct collision interaction. We had two very different views of what the risk truly was, and we never got a chance to find out because the application was pulled.
Great example. Thank you for sharing that, Sean. That's really great, and that feeds right into the kinds of things I think we're trying to do here. I would love to hear from anybody who wants to, but not putting anybody on the spot. It would be really helpful to know if this particular webinar here has been useful, whether additional meetings would be useful. For example, we heard from a number of people invited to this that they were very interested, but the date didn't work for them. We are going to loop back and see if it would be appropriate to hold the same meeting at a further date. And then we would like very much, following this, to be able to do some one-on-one telephone surveys with a number of you. We think that there's a great deal better opportunity to have a dialogue, to get into some of these areas, and I can understand for many of you, you may not have thought about this before and don't want to react quickly or on an open line, but we would like to be able to do that, and Michaela Freeman on our staff here will be leading those surveys. I would like to ask that if you don't want to be contacted, please drop Michaela an email. Otherwise, she will be in contact with you and other of your colleagues on this list to ask if we could set up such a survey. It would be, and we do intend to actually start on that next week, so that we can understand better how we can further the kinds of things we just talked about. How do we come to commonly understand levels of risk? How can we move them forward to where they need to be, where on the regulatory side of things, you can feel more confident that you will be able to make these consistent decisions quickly, because you guys are kind of in the hot seat here. So I would just like to ask, and as an example, just so you know where we hope we're getting towards, we hope to hear more, particularly from different regions of the country. We think there is great variability, obviously, in the ocean waters, in the animals, in the kinds of devices that are being looked at for different regions. And we propose, if we get the kind of feedback that makes this reasonable, to do some webinars based regionally, really focusing in on regional waters. So, enough said. Would anyone like to react, whether this meeting is useful, whether we should do more of these, whether phone surveys is something that you think would be useful, etc.? Sean, you got something there?
Yeah. Well, just one thought. I found this to be a useful meeting. I personally haven't had an update on the state of the science for a while, so this was very interesting to hear. And to see that what work has been done. I'm curious about the one-on-one phone interview, so I'll be looking forward to that when the time comes. And I think additional meetings of this type, regionally, nationally, what have you, will be useful, depending on progress of the science.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And actually, you raise a great point. We like to think we're pushing forward on the bounds of knowledge constantly. And one of the real advantages, as far as I'm concerned, of working with these other countries is while every country has a limited amount of both research and monitoring going on, as we kind of pool these things, we do see some progress. And we have seen progress even the last year. So great. Thank you. Good comment. Any other comments? So
yes, Andrea, another comment. How do we get Sean to move to Hawaii?
Well, you can take that up with Sean, Louise. Thank you. So I mentioned earlier, tethys and some of the things that we do. Up on the screen now, if you don't already get information from us, please go and sign up, and you'd like to, please go and sign up. There is a URL up on the screen, and what you will do is every 2 weeks we send out a tethys blast, which is a short, relatively short email that will update you on new papers, reports, etc. that have come into tethys, and you can go in there and access them and read them. It also will update you on upcoming events of importance, be they conferences or whatnot. There's also a news and information section that pulls some of the sort of the top news stories of what's going on in this industry, not necessarily about environmental effects, but you get a sense of what kind of proposals or development is coming along. I will note again that tethys serves marine energy and wind energy, so there's sort of a mix in there. But for those of you that are permitting marine energy devices, my guess is you also have offshore wind in your purview, so that you might find some of that really quite interesting. There's also the emails for my team up there, myself, Michaela, John, Nikki, also Amy Woodbury. Any of us always love to hear from you, be it what you thought of this meeting, suggestions for future meetings, etc. So please feel free to reach out. If you don't manage to jot those down, you can always go to tethys.pnnl.gov, find any of these contacts, any of this information. The last thing I do want to say is we have recorded this meeting. The slides and the audio of this meeting will be up on Tethys. We will send you a link to it. We may not put out the comments at the end. We will review those with who spoke, because we want to make sure everybody feels very comfortable with this. But you will be able to go back and download this presentation and the audio, and you can certainly pass that on to colleagues and friends. And we will send out a note that will be available. It'll be a few days, but that will be up. I'm going to let everybody get on with their day, but I would like, first of all, to thank you very much for taking the time and the interest to join us here today. I hope you will avail yourself of the opportunity to look at some of the information we have. The State of the Science report is also up on Tethys. If you could just go to the front page of Tethys, it's one of the crawl items up on top. You can jump right to it. If 250 pages is a little daunting for you, there is an 8-page executive summary. There's also a series of one-pagers that are organized around these stressors and chapters that give you a quick look at that. And incidentally, the executive summary is available in 7 languages, in case you wish that. Otherwise, with nothing further, again, thank you, and I think we'll conclude this meeting. Goodbye.